So I created my first webcomic. It's called Suds and it's a short read, only 8 chapters. You can find it on Tapas and some other webcomic hosting sites. Or actually don't read it, it's pretty bad, even considering that it was my first ever story I've written from start to finish. Even now I look back at it with cringe, even though I literally just finished it, but I guess that just shows how much I've grown while creating it. And now that I've gone and finished my first story, I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned from this experience. I want this video to help people who are interested in writing and drawing a webcomic of their own, or maybe you're in the middle of producing one and this video will give you that extra push you need to finish it. This will also be a reminder for future me to not make the same mistakes I've done with Suds. Now, without further ado, the 10 things I've learned from my first webcomic. So if you've read Suds, even though I told you not to, you might have noticed that it doesn't really look like the other mainstream webcomics. You know the ones I'm talking about, the vertical scrolling ones that are fully colored and stuff. Suds is literally the opposite of that style of webcomic, more akin to your traditional manga style. But that's the sort of style I like. I like manga, and ever since my line art renaissance, I knew that I wanted to do something more manga-like than webtoony, comic-y type stuff. So why bring this up? Well, if you're going to do webcomics, you should upload them to a website that fits your style of comic. Tapas and Webtoons are more known for their vertical webcomic style, so that probably hurt my viewership, and they were probably not the best place to host my story. Later on in the middle of producing Suds, I started to upload to other websites that fit the more traditional manga style better, such as Manga Plus, which compared to my uploads on Webtoons and Tapas did a lot better. Even things such as genre play a role in choosing where to upload. Webtoons has a lot of romance shoujo, fantasy, supernatural shonen, while Tapas has a lot of slice of life and more comic strip style stuff. So keep that in mind when choosing where to post your webcomic to maximize visibility. Or you could just upload it everywhere like how I did, but then you'll run into the problem of all of these websites having different parameters for file sizes, which is a pain. So I suggest posting to 1 or 2 platforms max. When I first conceptualized Suds, I had the general idea of what I wanted the main character to look like and had a lesser idea of the other characters. In fact, here's the original concepts I had for the character designs. As you can see, the dishwasher is mainly the same. Susie, while similar, had also changed from her first iteration I drew, and the chef character was ultimately cut from the story, so there's nothing to really compare him to. And yeah, that's about it. That's all the concept art I have for Suds, except for a floor plan of the kitchen that I never actually used. I don't think I need to tell you that this was a big mistake, because guess what? You're going to be drawing the same characters over and over and over and over again, multiple times during a single chapter or even a single page, from different angles and different expressions, to the point where you're going to be sick of drawing them. If you actually look through Suds, the characters aren't even on model most of the time, and that's mainly because there is no model to begin with. Now, you may be asking, Mikon, why didn't you just make a character sheet? And I'm asking myself the same question. I don't know why. Maybe because I just thought I didn't need to. I mean, the main character was easy enough to remember. Just, do this and that and bingo, bango, ha-ta-ta, you've got the dishwasher. And for the most part, that was the case. It was actually all the other characters that were troublesome. All these characters on screen right now are all drawn for the first time in their first appearances. I am not making this up. This is how stupid I was, which is why their first appearances and their last appearances look so different from each other. So learn from my mistakes and please make a character sheet for every major character for your own sanity. You don't want to be looking back on your past chapters just to remind yourself if the hair parts this way or that way, or how do the eyes look, or what color was this again. You want to have a character sheet that has all the information you need. It doesn't need to be a full-out Riot concept art sheet or a full 360 turnaround set day animation guide. All you need is a front view, a back view, and maybe a 3/4 view if you want to do some extra credit. And while creating the character sheet, you could also see if you actually like drawing the character, because like I said before, you're going to be drawing them a lot. Your character sheet should also be in the style in which you're drawing your comic or manga, and not some half-baked sketch, because when I first drew the head chef in my comic, it was fine to sketch, and in fact it was pretty fun to draw him. But when it came time to inking it and filling in the blacks and then doing the highlights in his hair, it was a beast I didn't see coming. I had effectively trapped myself into drawing him in such a way that was just unfun and taxing to do. It took like 2 or 3 chapters before I found a good way to go about filling his hair, and even then I'm not overly happy with the results. So definitely in my next project, I'm going to take my time to actually lab out character designs instead of pantsing it all the way. Before this project, I would have considered myself a competent artist, and I still think I am. I can draw decently well, and I'm able to work around my weaknesses, but drawing manga is a whole different type of difficult. I am a character illustrator by trade. I normally draw cute girls in pinup type poses with little to no background elements, and I use my decent color and value choices as a crutch to hide my weaknesses. I hide my basic anatomical knowledge with clever hiding behind objects, props, and clothes. I hide my poor draftsmanship with my painterly style and ambiguity in the edges. I was really good at hiding what I couldn't draw in plain sight. I feel as though with illustration, it's easier to fake being good, unlike with manga or pure line art where you need to convey form, perspective, texture, value, and all these other nuances through lines alone. It's more difficult to fake skill when it comes to inking. Not to mention the various amounts of things you need to draw. You're not just drawing characters talking, you're drawing characters acting, characters in motion, characters interacting with objects, with their environment, background, perspective. You're drawing everything. You're going to be drawing things you don't want to draw, things you've never drawn, and things you would like to draw. Comics and manga test what you can and can't draw, and if you can't draw it, it'll force you to draw it anyways. But because of this, you're actually putting in tons of mileage towards practicing, and you'll grow faster by drawing the things you don't want to draw. So don't see it as a burden, see it as an opportunity to level up. For example, I kind of enjoy drawing food now. I find myself in the mood to draw food when past me would have been fine with drawing cute girls only. So I think I leveled up in that aspect. This probably won't affect the 90% of people who may be watching this, but screentones, they're cool. Most webcomics, like I said before, are colored, but there's just something about tones that just hit different. When I first started drawing suds, I made the decision to actually not use tones. Instead, I used 3 grays, a light gray, a mid gray, and a dark gray to separate the values. And while that worked, it didn't really have the same punch and texture as tone does. And I know that the use of tones is more of a money-saving thing for the manga industry when it comes to printing, but it just has this sort of charm to it that normal values or even colored webtoons don't have. During the later chapters of suds, I actually introduced tones into my workflow, and in the last chapter, it was fully made with screentones. I found a workflow for it that I found to be very effective. The only problem I have with tones is that sometimes they are a little bit finicky because they're digital tones, so it's kind of difficult to gauge what it would look like on other screens or at different resolutions. Besides that though, I want to continue using screentones. I've also seen some comics with colored tones, and those look pretty fun, so I might want to try and experiment with that when I get the chance. Before starting this project, I was not a writer. I had no ability to write, although I did try in the past, back in middle school, with cringy results. So I was really going into the deep end with this project. And as it turns out, you can't just have a cool scene in mind and start drawing. Who knew? You need an actual outline, you need to actually plot and organize your story, you need to study story, the fundamentals of storytelling, because no matter how well thought you think your world building is or how cool you think your climax is, nobody is going to get to that point if it's not packaged well within a competent story. When I first had the idea for Suds, I had a couple cool scenes in mind, all of which weren't going to be until towards the end of the story. I let those ideas sit on the back burner for a while, and when I mean a while, I mean about 2 years, until I got off my ass and started to actually write. Again, with zero experience, and I wrote the first chapter and drew it. And I left it at that for almost a year because I was just completely lost. I didn't really know how to get from point A to point B in my story. I had all the scenes I knew I wanted to have, but I had no way to connect them all, and that was due to my misconceptions with story structure and how it functions. It wasn't until the end of 2022 that I actually looked into storytelling fundamentals and actually learned how to write. But the topic of story structure is pretty dense and would be better discussed in a future video. In December of 2022, I had actually rewritten the first chapter of Suds and wrote the entire script start to finish. First draft, cleaned it up, rewritten it, shipped it. I worked on it throughout the month on and off, and it ended up with about 120 pages. At that point, I thought that the hard work was basically over. I was an artist after all, not a writer at the time, so I thought that this was the best approach for this project. Do all the writing first, and when I'm sure I'm satisfied with the product, then I'll do the art. But when it came time to draw out the layouts, the storyboards, the name, let's just say it took a lot more brain power than I had originally thought. It should have been an easy task to transfer what I've written into drawings. Why wouldn't it be? I had even scripted the individual panels so that all the details were written out in plain English. I just needed to draw it. In theory, it makes sense and sounds streamlined. In practice, it was a lot more complex. When I was writing, I was more so envisioning the flow of the story instead of how it would look on the page. On the other hand, it was the opposite when it came time to storyboard the pages, and the two things clashed, and in the end it didn't really work on either end. Seeing a page layout in my head and scripting it was a lot different from drawing it. Some panels didn't have the impact I wanted, or the panels I wrote out were physically impossible to fit on the page. So I found myself rewriting and rearranging as I drew. It turned out to be a very inefficient, roundabout way to do this whole thing. To write, then rewrite again, storyboard, then rewrite to fit the storyboard, then draw, then rewrite again. You get the picture. The process I see myself doing in the future is to script while drawing the storyboard. It would go something like this. I'll write a rough script, just enough to get the general flow and dialogue, some plot points, and some panel notes when I have something specific in mind for the page. And then I'll draw the storyboard and rewrite along the way, effectively compacting and streamlining the process I had before. Because of the problems before with scripting and storyboarding, it had caused problems with paneling as well. I often found myself with either too little space or too much space to work with. The flow of the page was something I really struggled with because of my past mistakes. I would often split pages up or combine them together while mid-production. The main meat of the story was already written, so I didn't want to move too many things around, but then that created the problem of fitting a lot of things onto the page, more specifically text. Throughout the production, I had overestimated and underestimated how much space I would have on a page for text and drawings. I would look back at a page and see just a wall of text, but I didn't want to break up the text because then I wouldn't have any drawings to fill in the page, and it was just really bad. I'm sure as I study more and look into the ways other mangaka panel, I'll figure out some sort of panel theory on how you should arrange them or how you should divide a page, but instead I just used my very basic knowledge of design theory and composition theory to find my way around. I encourage you to look at your favorite mangaka or comic artists to see how they do their paneling. Drop some grids or something to figure out the ratio of panels and how they flow. The time it takes to typeset is a lot more than I would have expected. Even though I had the whole script typed out and all I needed to do was copy and paste, I would take about 1 to 2 hours to transfer and format all the text for a chapter onto the pages. And it didn't really help that Clip Studio's story editor isn't the most user-friendly feature. It took me forever to figure out how to actually use it. And then we have word balloons. I hated doing them in the beginning, but as I got into the groove of drawing word balloons, I mellowed out and I ended up enjoying the process. I didn't use the built-in balloon tool in CSP, nor did I use the available CSP balloon assets. Instead, I chose to hand draw all of them because I felt like I had more control over it, and I thought it looked way better hand drawn. And before you say,
Mikan, why are your balloons vertical? It's hard to fit the text like that in English. The only reason why it's like that in manga is because Japanese text goes up and down and
shut up, okay? You don't think I know that? I don't want to be that guy, but the vertical speech bubbles just look aesthetic, man. If it were horizontal, it'll look like a DC or Marvel comic. I didn't really like that look, so that's really the only reason why I did it, even at the detriment of more difficult typesetting. It just looks good. I like it. Now, choosing a font is hard. Finding the perfect font and then resizing it so that it's easy to read but at the same time not super intrusive. I primarily use Wild Words because it looked good and because everybody else was using it, so why not? But then I realized, oh no, will I get in trouble because I'm using these without a license? And, I did some research and it's entirely possible for me to get in trouble, but highly improbable. But that still left me with a weird feeling. So in the end, I ended up creating my own font with my handwriting. So I encourage you to just typeset the way you want to, There's no standardized rules for it. Use whatever type of bubbles you want. Use whatever fonts you want. Just make sure it's readable. That's the most important thing. I am a chronic procrastinator, so doing a project like a multi-chapter webcomic was a big endeavor, and honestly, I should have made my first a lot shorter in hindsight. The time it takes to do just one page is immense. I'll actually show you the amount of time it took to do all of Suds. Ready? Here. 8 chapters over the course of 5 months, 200 hours, and that was just drawing. It took 52% of my recorded working time over these months, and it is a lot for only 8 chapters. I did definitely get faster as I went, as I streamlined the process though, so your speed may vary, but doesn't this seem discouraging? Something that took me 5+ months to create can be read in under 30 minutes. It's a lot, but this was my very first run through and I can only get faster from here. For any of you procrastinators out there who have trouble finding the time or willpower to start, you need to focus up. 99% of the effort is starting it. Once you get into the groove for the day, it'll be difficult to stop. And nothing hits harder than that feeling of finally finishing up a chapter and you can stand back and admire your work. But how does one get into the zone? Well, here's a little graph for it, but it's really different for everybody. Some people can work in coffee shops, some can't and need someplace quieter like a library. Some people like to listen to heavy metal music, while others can't listen to music with lyrics. I can't tell you what works for you, it all depends on yourself. For me, I can't listen to music with lyrics when writing, but I can when drawing. I also like to listen to podcasts while I draw, since they're the perfect balance of noise while not being overly distracting. Some of my favorite podcasts are these, if you want to listen to what I like. I highly recommend them if you like a good laugh. Another tip to staying motivated, especially when there's no extrinsic value you're gaining, such as followers, likes, etc., is to take breaks with other art media. Whenever I felt stuck, I would go back to my roots and paint some cute anime girls. Although I love line art now, it will bring me to insanity if I draw them for 6 hours a day, every day. Not only do you need to take breaks with your artistic mind, but also your writing mind. Consume media, whether it be TV, anime, manga, books, whatever. Consume some sort of entertainment to study, to enjoy, to recharge. Leaving a day of rest for your brain to reset and think without the pressure to be creative is very important. For me, I don't do any work on Wednesdays, no art, no writing, no thinking about stories. I'm purely there to just enjoy and consume media I like. And for the last thing I've learned from completing my first webcomic is something that I myself can't do anymore. But for anybody out there who's an aspiring artist or writer that wants to do this sort of stuff, complete your first project. preferably a short one. Don't get stuck in the trap of thinking you need to get better at character design, or better at line art, or better at writing, or whatever excuse you have. No amount of planning you do right now will prepare you for your first webcomic. It's theory versus practice. You could definitely research how to swim, the muscles and mechanics used in swimming, the science of fluid dynamics and all that stuff, but preparation alone will not make you a good swimmer. Your first webcomic will not be your magnum opus, so don't be afraid of failure. You will only learn by doing. Don't wait around for the perfect opportunity to start. It doesn't matter if you suck at drawing, you suck at storytelling, or if you suck at both. You'll learn so many things from completing one crappy story than starting 100 unfinished ones. So stop waiting and just do it! Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe or something. I don't know. Do whatever. I'm not really good with outros, so bye. Or a full 360-degree turnaround set day animation.